must have dreamed 1,000 dreams, been haunted by a million screams, but I can hear the marching feet. They're moving into the street. Now did you read the news today? They say the danger's gone away, but I can see the fires still light. They're burning into the night. There's too many men, too many people, making too many problems, and not much love to go around. Can't you see this is a land of confusion? This is the world we live in, and these are the hands we're given. Use them and let's start trying to make it a place worth living in. Ooh, Superman, where are you now? When everything's gone wrong somehow. The men of steel, the men of power, are losing control by the hour. Now this is the time, this is the place, so we look for the future, but there's not much love to go around. Tell me why this is a land of confusion. This is the world we live in, and these are the hands we're given. Use them and let's start trying to make it a place worth living in. I remember long ago when the sun was shining and the stars were bright all through the night, and the sound of your laughter as I held you tight. So long ago. I won't be coming home tonight. My generation will put it right. We're not just making promises that we know we'll never keep. There's too many men, too many people, making too many problems, and not much love to go around. Oh, can't you see this is a land of confusion? Now this is the world we live in, and these are the hands we're given. Use them and let's start trying to make it a place worth fighting for. This is the world we live in, and these are the names we're given. Stand up and let's start showing just where our lives are going to.
Tell us from Irish America, the EU, the Irish government, some within the Westminster Parliament, they tell us that the Belfast Agreement, it has to be protected in all shapes and fashions. It's of paramount importance that that agreement must be protected. So therefore, people, that is their Achilles heel. That is the thing that we need to threaten. That is the thing that we need to take down. We need to destroy their precious agreement, because without unionist support, that agreement is over. Are we asking to return back to the bad old days? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You see, you can be against an appeasement process and you can be still for peace. But in 1996, the IRA let off a bomb in the Docklands in Canary Wharf, causing £500 million worth of damage. And that was the IRA tactically seeking to create what we now know to be an appeasement process. And ever since that point going forward, whether it be bombs in the Docklands, Canary Wharf, whether it be Northern Bank raids, whether it be gathering information that is useful to terrorists, whether that was killing people in 2015, one in the markets and one in Short Strand, and don't let anybody tell you that was not the IRA conglomerate linked to Gerry Adams' Sinn Féin group, because it was. You know, whether it was the guns being out on the streets in 2019 and again in 2020, one for Mr. Rooney, Lower Falls, D Company of the IRA, with their guns shooting over a coffin. And where's Simon Hoare shouting about those things? You see, it didn't matter. It constantly didn't matter. And they were only a few things that I just mentioned there. It didn't matter what the IRA done, when they done it, how they done it. It didn't matter if they murdered people. It didn't matter if they blew places up. It did not matter if they even, just quite lately, where they make rules in Stormont and they don't abide by those rules, where they get a British state funeral, all because to ensure that you don't threaten those who would come out onto the streets in violence again. And that's exactly what has happened from the inception of the talks about talks, going through to the Belfast Agreement, running right through to today's date. That Belfast Agreement and every single thing that flows from it, it doesn't work for British Unionists here in Northern Ireland. And you know, all the protocol rallies in the world, all the standing on stages in the world will not get the same results as threatening and pulling down and insisting that you're not going back anywhere near that Belfast Agreement until that there's a level playing field, until that we have our rights reinstated here in Northern Ireland, and we can continue on building reconciliation with the ordinary decent people of Northern Ireland from that day going forward. But until that day, stability can never occur in this country, because, you know, when you enhance one at the expense of another, well, you see, you get resentment, and no process that is ever produced real reconciliation has ever been built in such a way. So you see, there's the Belfast Agreement. There's what needs to be done with the Belfast Agreement. You know, we need to be very, very serious about how that it is that we protest from here on in. We need to protest against their precious agreement. And I'm talking to British Unionists here. And if we fail to do so, well, I'm afraid that every single thing that you've ever believed in will be lost and gone forever. Hello, Ben, and welcome yet again to Restore Live on a Wednesday evening. That's going out to the Restore UK platform on Facebook, also to the British Unionist People's Voice, and to the people on the live chat. And I'm sure from across the platforms, I'm looking at the numbers are considerably high this evening. If you could share from the Facebook channel, also share from British Unionist People's Voice on the YouTube channel. Also, you can share from there, and on the Twitter channel if you would retweet this broadcast. So welcome yet again, Ben, to Restore UK. And I have to say that
Thank you.
anytime that I ever ask you, you come on, and I've got to thank you for that, and thank you for and on behalf of the people here at Restore UK and the people that comes to follow our platform. Ben, whenever I had talked to you just a few weeks ago, and that was pre Rishi Sunak and his conglomerate being elected into Westminster, you had suggested to me, which was a good idea, that we hold back and that we do the stream whenever it is that we know the lay of the land in terms of Westminster. Now, Ben, I want to play you a very, very short clip. Now, this clip would be, I'm saying, seconds long. And this is the very first stream that you would have done with us back, I'm going to say, in 2020, Ben.
Anything that I'm going to regret, am I?
Well, bar that you were going to pass a lot of money our way to ensure that we flourish forever. You know, I'm teasing, nothing like that. I want to really remind you of something that I asked you back then. You know, I like to believe that we've been around politics for a very, very long time. And as you might have seen there from that little clip that I done, well, who was right, Ben? Whenever back in Drumore, I was saying that the only way to get results from the British government is to threaten the Belfast Agreement. And I think you agreed with me back then that there was no other way under the sun to move these people, because once that something is threatened that they need, that they want, well, as you'll have seen, they've begun to move, albeit that they haven't moved in a I'm going to say a far enough way, but still of all, it has moved them. So I want to remind you of something that you said back then, and this was me really looking forward into the future.
I've got my fingers crossed.
Asking you what your intentions would be if certain circumstances ever come to pass. So here we go,
Okay.
Ben. Sorry, wrong one. It's the wrong one. Here we go. Press Ben for answers, because I would say that he's a wise man, and a man that we need to listen to, and a man that I wish that our Conservative government would listen to. So Ben Habib for Prime Minister next time around. and this time around, Ben, I just hope that if it's Nigel Farage's new party that you're going to join and you're going to go forward and be elected with, I just hope that they don't back off this time, because, you know, people want to...
I can tell you one thing, John, whatever happens, I'm not backing off. And we've got, I can't disclose anything right now, but we've got moves afoot which are going to up the ante for Boris Johnson on Northern Ireland. And, you know, we will go on fighting this battle.
That's great. That's an exclusive. You got it here first. Thanks very much for that, Ben. Ben Habib, the man who suggested that he wouldn't back off. And here we are, 2022, having spent a lot of his own money, by the way, putting his money where his mouth is. Well, I can absolutely suggest that you're not backing off. Ben, over to you. If you would just like to, again, people here at this live stream actually knows you, but I'm going to say that you're a good friend of Northern Ireland and you're very welcome here. So if you would like to say your hellos to the stream and really give us some commentary on what you've seen so far.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining me again and you know, having me, John, on your platform. It's a great pleasure to be here and to speak to fellow unionists in Northern Ireland. The moves that I had afoot that I referred to back in that video clip, you've reminded me, was actually, we were planning the legal action, which is now going to the Supreme Court. That was pre the launch of that legal action. And the reason I was slightly coy about it in that clip was because we were trying to gain support. You know, I was trying to gain support from the DUP and from the UUP to support that legal action, and also to get Lord Trimble to join me, the late Lord Trimble, and actually we were successful. So once I got that grouping together, you know, we could be open about it. But we fought we fought the case in the Belfast High Court. We fought the case in the Belfast Appeals Court. We've lost every time. But the eye-catching thing that I think has been revealing and beneficial to our case is that the active union, which Lord Trimble, the architect of the Belfast Agreement, described as the union, the active union is the union, that has been breached. the Belfast High Court adjudicated that it's been breached, and the appeals court adjudicated it's been breached. So actually, by that measure, John, we don't have a United Kingdom at the moment. There is no United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I'm digressing slightly, but during the funeral, when Prince Charles became king, and during the funeral arrangements for the Queen, repeatedly it was said that on the death of the Queen, the Prince of Wales elevates himself to the king, to being king of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And every time I heard that, I kept thinking, are these guys actually listening to what's going on? Because, the union is threatened. But it's part of that, I can't remember what they call it, but it's part of the, he hasn't been invested yet. He hasn't had his coronation, but it's part of the investiture procedure that they declare that on the death of the Queen, he takes over as king of the United Kingdom, which is defined as Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And that's been breached. The Act of Union's been breached. And it's very, very eye-catching. So I'm looking forward to the Supreme Court hearing, which takes place, for those of you who are interested, on the 30th of November and 1st of December. We then won't get a result for a couple of months. But there is, I hope, a chance that politics won't trump the day, and that we will get blind British justice adjudicating our case on the merits of the case. And I can't see, I know you want to talk about the Belfast Agreement, but I can't see how any parliament can be entitled to set aside by mistake, which is what the High Court adjudicated, set aside by mistake the very foundations of the country. And it is, I don't think Parliament has a right to do it. Parliament's primary obligation is to protect the fabric of the country. It can't accidentally undermine the fabric. And so I think the Belfast High Court has fundamentally misunderstood the importance of the Act of Union, and so has the Appeals Court. They've had to recognize that it's been broken, but they are hiding behind legalese, absolutely an awful way to adjudicate, hiding behind minutiae and technicality to actually say Parliament did this legally. It didn't. It couldn't possibly have done it legally. It's like saying, we abrogate all responsibility for promoting and protecting the national interest as parliamentarians. They're not at liberty to do it. They're there in Parliament to protect and promote British national interests. And the Act of Union is at the very heart of British national interest, because without it, there is no United Kingdom. So, sorry, I've kind of banged on about that, and we can come to the Belfast Agreement because I know you want to discuss that, John. But I think the whole thing, as I felt right from the beginning, has been a travesty. That's why I'm in this fight. As I've said many times, my love for Northern Ireland is no greater than my love for any other part of the United Kingdom. But I'm in this fight because there is something that is terribly wrong with what is going on at the moment, and the way 1.8 million British citizens are being treated across the Irish Sea from where I am.
Yeah, 100%, Ben, and you'll see the little meme here just behind me, and I'm moving across for people to see, and I'm going to read from it there, where David Trimble had said in 1998 that the Northern Ireland's place within the UK has been secured. The Act of the Union, the fundamental piece of legislation defining Northern Ireland's place in the UK, it remains firmly in place. The Act of the Union is the Union.
There you go. The Act of the Union. The Act of Union is the Union. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that was the statement that David Trimble would have made at the time. Now, my interest then, I guess, in the Belfast Agreement, alongside this protocol bill, everything that goes with it, the Brexit process. My interest in the Belfast Agreement is high, that I believe that the Belfast Agreement has been completely hollowed out and made void of any protections that would that unionists need to protect themselves in the future. I mean, the foundation of the Belfast Agreement was that it had to be a cross-community document, a cross-community processing where that, well, you can't demonize one, or you can't enhance one whilst you demonize and diminish others. You know, maybe I should have said that a bit better, but you can't enhance one whilst you diminish others, let's just say. And what's happening right now here in Northern Ireland, and the people that would have sat down and that would have negotiated that agreement in good faith, the likes of David Trimble, the likes of the people on the unionist side, well, they would have negotiated that on the basis that they understood that the union was safe. The union was safe because there was this thing called a principle of consent. There was a cross-community aspect of the mechanisms that worked within the Belfast Agreement, so much so that even if any of the participants to that agreement had felt aggrieved or not happy with something, well, they could have raised the thing called a petition of concern. And that was enough to block anything from going through, providing that it was, that if it was being done for the right
communities, thing. Or allow it through if both communities consented to it.
Yeah,
that was the basis of it, cross-community consent. Yeah,
100%. Now, what I want to do is that, and I'm showing you these here in front of me, and sorry, I'm on a green screen here, and this is what happens. But I've got with me the legal arguments that has been made in this protocol case going forward to the Supreme Court, 30th of November, 1st of December, which I'll be there, Ben, and no doubt you'll be there yourself.
Good.
And we've got the government's arguments, or should we say the government's defence against these arguments. And whenever I read these and went through them in depth, I see huge implications of this protocol having been put into place. And I'm going to state, after having read this, and we're maybe going to go through some of it, is that I believe that the Belfast Agreement is actually unworkable, and it's now not a system which is there to provide a protection to a so-called minority group or to someone who has concern, or to protect against the causes which would have caused the problems in the past here in Northern Ireland. And I believe that it is an absolute constitutional nightmare that we have actually facing us whenever I read these arguments versus the defence that the government is being put forward. And I'm coming to a question here, Ben, but the very fact that the government is defending against what a layman can see here as a huge problem storing up for the future, the fact that our government, the British government, are defending against these arguments, it doesn't leave much hope for the future, even of the United Kingdom, Ben. Have you any commentary on that?
I have. So the easiest way to do away with the protocol, the most expedient, easy, political and legal way to do away with the protocol, which is what the government repeatedly says it wishes to do. It wishes to pass the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which fundamentally changes the protocol. If that was genuinely their aim, what they would do is not contest our case. That is the easiest way to do away with the protocol, because if they accepted the arguments that we're making in the case, that the Act of Union has been breached, that the Belfast Agreement's been breached, that the human rights of Northern Ireland have been, British citizens in Northern Ireland have been undermined, the Article 50 process itself has been undermined. If they accepted those arguments, the protocol would automatically become unlawful. And then under Article 46 of the Vienna Convention, the government would, entirely in accordance with international law, be at liberty to terminate the protocol. But it's chosen not to take that path because the government is in bad faith. The government does not want to change the protocol meaningfully. What the government is hoping to do is to patch it up to the extent necessary to mask its most visible impacts and to allow the pernicious undermining of the Constitution of the United Kingdom to go unchecked. I have no doubt about that, because the idea of not contesting our case and having this wonderful get out of jail card, free get out of jail card presented to them was put to Boris Johnson. He rejected it. It was put to Liz Truss. She rejected it. And actually, I haven't bothered putting it to Rishi Sunak because I don't think Rishi Sunak has any intention whatsoever Liz Truss was at least on her front foot with the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. Rishi Sunak, I know from reliable sources, was himself against the bill. And the bill, I don't want to get too technical because it's all a bit dull, but the bill is a very weak bill. The Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is a very weak bill. And Rishi Sunak was against it. He did not want to ruffle EU feathers, even with this pathetic little bill that is yet to make its way onto the statute books. So the government is not committed to getting rid of the protocol. Anyone who misunderstands that, who buys this narrative from the government, the propaganda, is fundamentally misunderstanding the direction of travel. The government does not wish to change the protocol fundamentally. It keeps talking about negotiations with the EU because it wants to mask the effects of the protocol as far as the public are concerned, and then they'll think they've done their job and they can just get on with business as usual.
Yeah, Ben, that's why I like you explaining things, because I think that you think along the same lines as myself. I mean, I don't deal in non-objective truth, let's just say. And whenever I see things happening in front of my eyes, well, I begin to understand that the worst is to be expected whenever we see what outcome they're driving us towards. Now, Ben, I do want you to actually touch on this protocol bill, and I know that we've done it before, but this is just for the newcomers to the stream. In that I am now calling that bill after having read it several times, having read it with legal minds in the presence. I'm going to say that I see it as what I would like to term a snakes and ladders bill, that it promises you the earth, the moon, and the stars. And in order for you to gain anything from within that bill, well, you get to square 99 on the snakes and ladders board, and you have to go back to number 1 20 times over to get anything from it, which it's the promise of nothing. Would you just like to give us your interpretation of what you think that the protocol bill is?
Sure, absolutely. Before I do that, by the way, John, I don't know if you get messages, if you get questions coming in, please do ask me, because I'd like to engage with with the viewers. But so the protocol bill was put forward by Liz Truss. It was her construction, designed apparently, ostensibly, to deal with the worst aspects of the protocol. And so it promises in clauses 1 through to 20 of the protocol bill to get rid of the ECJ, to remove European Union law from the statute books of Northern Ireland, to bring back control effectively of Northern Ireland into the United Kingdom's customs union and outside, and take it out of the EU's customs union, and to create red and green channels for goods. Green channel being for goods that are destined for Northern Ireland, and red channel for goods destined for the Republic of Ireland. But to leave the adjudication of that to British authorities, rather than as present, we've got effectively EU officials on British soil adjudicating our processes. So it was designed to take away all these things. And as you say, it promises the earth. But when you get to clause 26 of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, what it says, and it's devastating what clause 26 says, is that all the clauses that I've just described to you, these 20 clauses that add up to what I've just described, have no legal effect until further regulations are passed by either the government, if the government is entitled to do it through statutory instrument, or if it requires a further act of Parliament, then it's got to go back to Parliament. So the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is merely a declaration of intent. It's not actually a legally binding document in any operational sense. It is what I would call, John, designed to play to the crowds, to satisfy people who haven't got an attention to detail, who don't read it through until the end. It's a bit of a saber-rattling exercise with the European Union in the hope that they might negotiate with us, but they're not stupid. They would read it through, 100 times until they fully understand it. And they would have seen within 5 seconds, as I did, that it's just a framework. It's a saber-rattling thing. It's not real. And predictably, it's not doing the job. It was launched back in June. We are now in November, and it's nowhere near the statute books. And even when it gets on the statute books, just to reiterate, it is meaningless because further regulation and further laws are required.
What I identified, Ben, and we've been doing this on various streams over the time frame, and we've got a lot of good people in the background here, capable of doing the research and listening for the sound bites and putting the framework together. But we understood things to be that the entire equation with reference to this entire Brexit process, whether that be from America, Irish America, the EU themselves, the Dublin government, the Westminster government, some of the people that would support the Brexit or support the anti-Brexit campaign, even here in Northern Ireland, and we're not going to get into knocking parties here in Northern Ireland, and I have very strong views on some of those parties and some of the people at the heads of those parties, but they're promoting this thing called a landing zone. And well, I do have to mention this name, but Doug Beattie of the Ulster Unionist Party, he would say that the landing zone is, and he explained it. Micheál Martin would say that the landing zone is, and Doug Beattie claims to be responsible for having sold that landing zone to the Americans, to the EU, and to the Dublin government in 2019. Now, the landing zone of which he spoke is actually the protocol bill. That's exactly what it is. It was translated into text and put out to the various parties. So whenever I hear I see the charade of people saying, well, we're not accepting of that. For example, the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, would you believe that they have this landing zone in their party manifesto before the last assembly election? You know, but yet they're claiming that they're not liking of it, but yet they've all agreed to it. Is the truth of the matter. So I don't know whether it's ever going to see the light of the day, and I'm glad that it doesn't see the light of the day.
The protocol bill is never going to see the light of day.
Yeah. And I'm glad that it won't. And the reason for that is that I seen it, and you know, you've got to excuse me for being a realist here, but I seen that as, and I'm going to read from some of this legal text here and the arguments being made against in the Supreme Court, but I seen that as having lifting the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and having transported it and placed it at Larne, at Belfast, and in Warrenpoint. And I'm going to use this quote unquote permanently, because once that was lifted and put there, I would say that was going to be a full and final settlement in where the Unionists were never, ever going to be able to gain that ground back again. I mean, I likened it on the tug of war in where that Irish America, the Europeans, the Dublin government, and with the help aided and abetted with Westminster, they've trailed us across a lot, you know, to lose some rope, and we're never ever going to get that rope back again. And the danger is this, and you and I have spoke about this from even way back the start of last year when the protocol came into being. But the danger is this, and these people, they do not see that once that full and final settlement is put in place, Nicola Sturgeon and her conglomerate are going to be demanding exactly the same treatment. And therein lies the real danger. It's the breakup of the United Kingdom in its embryonic form, and they don't realise the dangerous game that they're playing. Have you anything to say on that, Ben?
Oh, well, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that the government doesn't appreciate that it is presiding over the beginning of the breakup of the United Kingdom. And it's not just Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland actually technically is not part of the United Kingdom right now, because the Act of Union, Article 6, the crucial aspect that binds economically Northern Ireland into the rest of the Union, it's been set aside. You know, we know that. The High Court's adjudicated that, the Appeals Court. So technically, Northern Ireland isn't even part of the United Kingdom. We go on talking about it as if it's still there because we're still hoping and fighting. But technically, the UK doesn't exist. And Nicola Sturgeon is looking at all of this. I know that she is in communications with Sinn Féin. She's talking to Michelle O'Neill and Mary Lou MacDonald. You know, she's talking to them all and gaining from their experience and following their lead. And but I think there is hope, by the way, and the hope is this. And I know that you've got your own views on the local parties in Northern Ireland, but the hope is this. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, I think, is going to hold firm. I think he recognizes that the burden of the protection of the union has now fallen on his shoulders. It's not something that should fall to devolved government or to individual heads of parties in provinces. But Westminster has shirked its obligation to protect the country. And therefore, the DUP, and in this case embodied by Jeffrey, have no choice but to take that burden on themselves. And I think Jeffrey fully understands the burden which is now on his shoulders and the importance of not breaking. And I think we can all take great encouragement from the fact that he has, when he brought Stormont down, he has not gone back. He's stuck to his word. And even under the threat from Chris Eaton Harris that there would be an election if they didn't reform Stormont, he didn't reform it. And that's very meaningful, because the ministers that were governing under the 6-month rule, for having been appointed ministers in the last administration, they now have lost their position. And so Northern Ireland is effectively under direct rule from Westminster. And that's precisely where we want this right now. We do not want Stormont. And I think Jeffrey fully understands that we cannot have Stormont. And then the other thing I think we can take encouragement from, John, is that the next April is the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement. And Biden and Michael Martin and everyone else wants to be able to get on a plane, go to Belfast, and pat themselves on the back and say what a marvelous job they've done with the Belfast Agreement. But in all likelihood, they won't be able to do that because Stormont will not be functioning next April. And I think what you might find, this is the optimistic take, and people in the UUP will not like what I'm about to say, but what we might now find that this is actually the beginning of the end of the Belfast Agreement, because if Sir Geoffrey holds firm and you can't celebrate the 25th anniversary and you have direct rule reimposed, actually the Belfast Agreement ceases to function in any meaningful sense. It's not doing its job. And so everything's in a muddle. And that's where it will stay until the British government has enough courage to then terminate the protocol. And then you can start again. The Belfast Agreement then could, come back into being, and then you can start again with a fresh landscape. But the thing that I can't answer, and I don't think anyone's got the answer to this, is how long is it going to take for Westminster to have the courage to stand up for the Union of the United Kingdom?
Yeah, 100%. Now, let me give you a wee bit of history here, Ben. And this is me being close to this part of politics within the United Kingdom. Yeah. I remember let me get this right, 2019, 2017, October of 2017, a man had contacted me. He was very, very close to a particular political party that was involved in signing us up to the Belfast Agreement. And he said to me that, John, I think, and others think, that you're the man that needs to know this, that they're planning a 20th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement. This is what they told me in 2017. And I said, excuse, this is an old Ulster term, but nah, they're definitely not. Sure, Sinn Féin has that government down. Sure, that doesn't function. And excuse me for saying this also, but they wouldn't have the balls. This is what I said. Ben, these people have no shame. These people celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Belfast
Did they?
Agreement
With Stormont down?
at a time when Sinn Féin had it down. So I don't mean to discourage you, but
anyway,
they have no shame.
I travel in hope.
They have no shame. And but that's a joke. But I didn't believe it. So much so that I wouldn't break that story, and it was gold. I wouldn't break it. What I says, well, here's how we'll do it. If I can use your name to say that and he let me use his name, I said, well, such and such told me that this is what was going to happen. And that's how we got it out there.
Well, I think it may be different now, John, because the Belfast Agreement is being brought into question, isn't it? For the first time, and it really is being brought into question. People are saying, well, if the Belfast Agreement can't protect us from the protocol, the Belfast Agreement ain't working. If cross-community consent doesn't do what it says on the tin, the Belfast Agreement isn't functional. So let's just bin the Belfast Agreement. And I know people who are prepared to be more, I'm going to choose my words very carefully because this is being recorded, but people who are prepared to be perhaps, more on the front foot, more forthright even than I am, I think are prepared now to say, bin it, leave it, people who were doves are turning into hawks. That's what I'm reading.
Yeah, I can see that there is. I mean, there's a groundswell of opinion that it doesn't work for unionism, and it, again, I'll condense a little bit of history with reference to it, and I go way back to the signing of this Belfast Agreement, and the history is this. That in 1994, there was a Downing Street Declaration, late 93, December 1993. There was paramilitary ceasefires in 1994. There was talks with reference what would happen with reference the signing of an agreement. That started in late 94, going through to 1998, lasted for about 4 years. And in those talks, in that time frame between 19 and 94, late 94, November 94, and the signing of the Belfast Agreement, which was Good Friday, Easter time of 1998, you see, the IRA showed that they really weren't serious about peace whatsoever. And there was a huge event, and you know of this event because you live in the area where this event actually took place. In February of 1996, the IRA, they put into place what I call a tactical bomb. And that tactical bomb was placed in a place called Canary Wharf. It caused £500 million worth of damage. And that was when that they were involved in talks with the John Major government back then. And that was the point whenever I would have realized, whenever I believe that other people should have realized that these people were not serious about peace. And from that point, what was meant to be, what was drawn up, which was put forward as a peace process, well, it became an appeasement process, because in order to have the IRA part of that process, the government, that was John Major's government at the time, and then it soon ended up that it was Tony Blair's government. Well, it didn't matter what, you heard me earlier on, it didn't matter what they done, when they done it, how they done it, didn't matter whether they planted bombs, killed people, they were gathering information likely to be of use to terrorists. It did not matter. They knew that they had to be part of that process, and they still do it today, that they threaten left, right and centre, and they get concessions as a result of their threats to walk away. Now, there are a lot of scenarios which could actually play out here, but no self-respecting unionist who cares about the United Kingdom, who cares about Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom, that lives in Northern Ireland, could actually support what's going on. As I said in that earlier video clip, you can be against an appeasement process, but you can be desperately wanting peace. That's me, Ben. That's me.
Yeah.
I'm not a man that wants to cause anybody any problems,
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you, John. There's an asymmetry between how unionists see the Belfast Agreement and how nationalists see it.
Yeah.
Unionists see it as a peace settlement, and nationalists see it as an accommodation on which they can build for further, nationalist agenda, for basically as a bridgehead towards unification of Ireland. And I know that anecdotally. I can't say that that's universal, but I know that anecdotally because I've taken the trouble to go and debate with nationalists. I've been on their platforms and I've met them, and I've talked to people in the Labour Party, and even people in the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. They see the protocol is a natural next step towards unification. Yeah. They say it to me, So unionists saw it as a settlement, and these guys see it as a bridgehead. So there's an asymmetry there, and it's a very uncomfortable position. And that agreement will be under real stress if that asymmetry continues and the fissures get wider and wider as the protocol debate goes on. And so I suppose the question then comes, will the British government ever stand up for Northern Ireland? And I think eventually it will. And with all things British, we will do it after the cost has been much higher than it needed to have been. And when our backs are utterly against a wall, and when we could have done it much easier, much earlier on. I think a time will come when people in Westminster will wake up and say, right, okay, we've got to do something here. You know, I don't know when that will be, but I think it will come.
In order to, I'm going to say, clean up this stream. I mean, people sees me as I tell it as it is. I often tell the uncomfortable truths. You know that about me. You've seen me in operation, even in public. But I'm going to say that I would only wish that people would have seen what we seen back whenever that you said last whenever the protocol came into being. That was a month after the protocol came into being, where I played that clip at the start of this stream, where you said that you will not be backing down this time. You see, you had the foresight, you had the prescience to understand that this, I mean, you won't change, you can't change, a leopard won't change its spots. They're hell-bent on keeping themselves on their own feet onto this globalist table. And I'm not talking about our politicians at a local level. I'm talking about at Westminster level here. I'm talking about at national level. And we did see just a few weeks ago when high that the markets, Ben, and I know that you know a wee bit about this because that's the sort of game that you're involved in, but how that the markets nearly dictated who the Prime Minister was. Now, I'm not an economist, but I'm certainly have been involved in business. And whenever that I look at what it was that Liz Truss was proposing, what I seen and what she was proposing tax cuts, albeit very minor to the people. But she was also trying to do things in such a way that she appeased those that might try to cause her harm. But it doesn't matter what you do for these people, they'll still try to cause that harm anyway. Would you just like to tell us a wee bit about what you think happened to Liz Truss as a result of, and why did it happen, let's just say?
Well, I for the first time in many years, I supported someone in the Conservative Party, and that was Liz Truss. I was very pleased with her vision of how she saw the United Kingdom during the leadership contest. And Rishi Sunak, I see as an EU puppet. He may claim to be a Brexiteer, but he's an EU puppet. Liz Truss's agenda was one of deregulation and reducing taxes. As it happens, I wouldn't have reduced the taxes that she sought to reduce in her mini budget. I would have tackled other things. But the principle of tax reductions and deregulation is a fundamentally important principle because we are a highly overregulated economy with taxation at a post-World War II high. Can you imagine under 12 years of Tory government, and they apparently stand for low taxes, we are at a post-World War II high in taxes. And so I was completely behind her. But what her vision required was to reduce taxes. And that meant that the bean counters saw a hole in the budget. And the bean counters are incapable of understanding that actually when you cut taxes, you grow the economy and the exchequer makes more money. It's something Maggie Thatcher understood. So when she cut taxes, actually the exchequer got richer. It collected more money. And, there's a technical, it's called the Laffer curve. There's a kind of optimum level of where tax needs to be in order to maximize the return that government gets. But we are at a post-World War II high on taxes. So any sane economist knows taxes need to be cut. But when you cut taxes, and if you're a bean counter and you can't see where the money's coming from, you then say, that means government borrowing is going to go up. And the markets didn't like the idea that they would have to fund the British government, because if government borrowing goes up, governments have to borrow from the markets. And the markets got into a bit of a tiz, and the markets were already a bit iffy because of inflation and a bit worried about where gilt yields were going and so on. And the person who hung Liz Truss out to dry, the individual who defenestrated a democratic government, was Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England. He printed £500 billion worth of cash to lock the economy down and to do furlough schemes and corona bounce back loans and all that kind of thing. The damage that did was vast, but he wouldn't help Liz Truss get her optimistic vision of growth across the line. He had to stand behind Liz Truss and say, if the markets weaken, I'll buy some gilts. I'll make sure that the gilt price is supported. He didn't do it. He was briefing against her in the markets, and he was slow to come to support the pension schemes who found themselves in trouble, which by the way had nothing to do with her. The pension schemes were in trouble because they had bought stupid derivative products they'd over-leveraged themselves and exposed themselves to a reduction in the value of gilts. They'd magnified their exposure to a reduction in the value of gilts. And that was a pension fund problem which Andrew Bailey was fully obliged to address, and he hung Liz Truss out to dry. And the mistake Liz Truss made was U-turning. The minute she U-turned, the markets, the mainstream media, Andrew Bailey, the Treasury, and don't forget the Treasury have a big hand in this, the civil servants in the Treasury, thought, right, we can scent blood here. She'll turn. And then, you know, the hound dogs were after her. And I think it's a tragedy, John, that Liz Truss is gone. Leaving aside the protocol for a second, she was the first optimistic, growth-orientated prime minister we've had since Maggie Thatcher. We haven't had one since then. We've had a progressive move towards greater and greater state control, greater and greater state interference. And as the state grows, taxes grow. And what can be more undemocratic than taking money away from people and telling them they don't have the right to decide how they spend their own money? And that is what's been happening for the last 25, 30 years. And Liz Truss was a rare, but perhaps, you know, the last ray of sunshine we will see for a long time now, because Treasury orthodoxy, this globalist kind of agenda, as you described it, seems to have won the day. And that is a disaster for the United Kingdom. We needed to pivot away from that agenda. We needed to chart a path economically that was good for the UK, where our people had taxes reduced, where they had regulations reduced, where businesses could operate properly. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, again, I'll add to that by saying is that, you know, globalization won, British government nil under what just happened there. And we do, I mean, I've been watching sort of the likes of Yanis Varoufakis, and I know that I wouldn't agree with his politics. I certainly have to take into account what happened in Greece and his experiences of what happened in Greece. And he, you know, whenever you look at the story, it was exactly the same situation that happened to Greece. And we done a stream about it just a few weeks ago there, Ben. I'm going to say to Brian Holmes, Brian, I'll come back to you in a wee second there. And I know that you've got, you know, the basis of a question there. If you would like to maybe condense the question for us, we'll come back to you and we'll put it to Ben very, very shortly. Now, Ben, I'll tell you what I want to do now is that we're moving on. I like to sort of flow in what it is that we're doing. And, you know, we never discussed this before that we come on, and I want to move. So, okay, we've discussed the protocol. I mean, with all this legal stuff in front of us, and I can just sort of say this in a nutshell because we've so much to get through, and we'll do another stream about that. We'll focus on the legal arguments versus the government's defence in the future. But in the legal arguments that I see being put forward, I mean, I read them, and as a layman, I think to myself, you know, how any person from a lawful standpoint could actually argue against what is being said there. And what I mean is, and this is the last, we're going to talk about the Belfast Agreement, but, you know, the repercussions of some of the things that is being done. The protocol is put into place. The protocol, in my view, has removed the principle of consent. The protocol causes constitutional change in Northern Ireland without the consent of the people, which was contained within the Northern Ireland Act, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, for others that don't understand that. You know, there was not a vote that was put to the people, and in fact, it would have been even unlawful to put a vote to the people, given that 17.4 people plus million people voted for the Brexit referendum. It was a democratic referendum. It was clearly defined by David Cameron whenever he said that there will be one vote, there won't be any negotiation or renegotiation. What the people decide will be the way that it's implemented. And I look at things and I say that, well, Northern Ireland are second-class citizens. Northern Ireland have had their democracy removed. Northern Ireland are not being treated the same as England, Scotland and Wales, albeit that I still call it Brexit in name only, even for England, Scotland, and Wales.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah,
not called Brexit by any measure. Yeah.
So whenever I look at this, these legal arguments, and here's the danger. Now, we're now going to bring you back to the Belfast Agreement, and we're going to say that You see, the great and the good were telling us that the Brexit or the Good Belfast Good Friday Agreement had to be protected. This internationally recognised agreement cannot be in any way undermined. Now, I see this Belfast Good Friday Agreement being hugely undermined. That's whenever I read the constitutional lawyers, their paperwork and the government's paperwork. And I see the implications of that undermining being this is that there is no basis, absolutely no basis. And I'm asking people to listen to this. And I know that there'll be a lot of people in this stream that is even, to do with, say, DUP or whatever, but there is no basis for unionism in Northern Ireland actually supporting this Belfast Agreement going forward, because that if the cross-community support, we're not going to go into the articles of this, but we do have it here, and I talked to you about it earlier on, but if the cross-community support or the cross-community mechanisms within even Stormont right now, which flows from the Belfast Agreement, has been removed by the British government to provide for a vote in where that a conglomerate of minorities can actually vote this protocol into being forever and a day in 2024, with repercussions that if that cross-community that vote has been removed, then there is another mechanism even within the Belfast Agreement called the principle of the petition of concern, and that was there that if there was something that one community was not happy with, well, what they could do is they could say raise a petition of concern, and that wouldn't happen. But it seems to be that we're being pushed towards this 2024 vote, which I think, or I understand, is going to happen somewhere between October and December of 2024. And once this conglomerate of minorities outvote unionists in that assembly, well, they're going to try to pull that old parliamentary sovereignty trick in where that your political representatives vote for it. So you have to put up and shut up with this protocol, which
But that's why
removes
it's so
you from.
important Stormont shouldn't reform.
This is where I'm coming to, and that's the question I wanted to ask you, is that, and you've actually said it for me, is that this is the why that we appeal that this cannot reform. I mean, even they're talking about, okay, as a token of good faith, should you put a speaker into Stormont? Well, then the speaker puts the ministers into place, and once the speaker's there, then all sorts of things can happen. So it needs to be, look, we're here. Peter Robinson, I don't know why you read what Peter Robinson said last week, where he said, we've came this far, let's not mess it up now. That's stick to the fight. When things seem worst, we must not quit. And that comes from that old poem.
I mean, the reason Westminster's desperate for Stormont to reform is because they want to have that vote in 2024 that you mentioned. And then they say, well, that was the democratic will of Stormont.
Yeah.
And it's not. They've changed the Belfast Agreement. They've removed the cross-community consent to which you referred. And they've made it a straight vote in Stormont. It's completely wrong. And the vote should have taken place before the protocol was foisted on Northern Ireland. It's much more difficult to get a vote in favour of a change than it is to get a vote to prevent a change. And they knew that. That's why they foisted the agreement onto Northern Ireland and put the onus on unionists then to have to change, to get a vote to change it, which is much more demanding. They absolutely robbed unionists of their negotiating voting position. And it's a fundamental travesty. And so, of course, Jeffrey gets this. And I just don't think Stormont has a future now. It's definitely going to go through 20. And Chris Eaton-Harris's bluff has been called. He was threatening this election, which, by the way, would have been meaningless because there would have been an election and then Stormont again wouldn't have reformed. It would have just been a crashing waste of money. But his bluff has been called. And he was talking nonsense. He was threatening unionists. That's what he was doing. Chris Eaton-Harris was threatening unionists, saying, if you don't reform Stormont, I'm going to call another election. And I'm so glad that unionists stayed firm and his bluff was called. And now he is without clothes. Chris Eaton-Harris has no authority. He has demeaned himself by making a threat which he was not prepared to follow through with. And that is greatly to unionist strength and again, without wishing to, sound like I'm blowing smoke up someone's proverbial backside, is, a great testimony to Geoffrey. We mustn't underestimate the pressure that Sir Geoffrey is under from all sides to reform Stormont, and he stood firm. And it's really important to recognize he is the man. There is one man who is standing at Thermopylae, if you like, seeing off the Persian hordes, trying to get to Athens, and that is Sir Geoffrey right now. It shouldn't be. It should be Rishi Sunak, but Rishi Sunak couldn't care less.
Yeah, indeed. Good cop, bad cop. Geoffrey has to stand firm because we will not let him away with it.
That's for
good cop, bad cop. So what I want to do, Ben, here, well, as you know, after that I would have talked to him in Dromore, he came to me, we shook each other's hands, and I said, well, it's nothing personal, it's politics. And that's how it is. He's very accepting of that type of thing.
Yeah.
Ben, I just want to, there's a couple of more wee things that I just want to sort of put into the mix here on this stream in order to get a few sound bites, let's just say, on these cases. So I'm going to play a very, very short clip here from Tony Blair, something that we found, something that Tony Blair was admitting, where we don't really expect to get these types of admissions out of Tony Blair. Just listen to this, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more.
In June 2016, we had the referendum, and that expressed the will of the people, but the will of the people isn't something fixed or unchangeable. If the circumstances change, the will can change, the views can change. We knew that we voted to leave the European Union, but we didn't yet know the new relationship. We've got the right to rethink. It's not that we have to rethink, but we've got the right to rethink if we want to. So when we see this new relationship, and I think the new relationship will be one in which Britain is either trying to keep very close to Europe, in which case we'll have to obey Europe's rules, but we'll have lost our seat at the table of decision making, or alternatively, it'll be very far from Europe, in which case the damage to Britain economically will be quite significant. I think when people see this new relationship, they're going to ask themselves again the question, well, is this really worth it? I think we also have to deal with the underlying reasons why people voted for Brexit. Now, those reasons were often to do with issues like immigration, concerns about immigration, concerns about communities left behind, economic and cultural alienation. I think you have to deal with those reasons. Now, some of that can be dealt with by Europe also coming forward and saying, look, the circumstances that gave rise to Brexit in Britain are also circumstances that obtain in a lot of Europe as well. In many ways, Europe's become a kind of lightning rod for a whole lot of anxieties and concerns that people have that really aren't concerns that are about Europe, but are about people's worry, which is very real, that they've lost control over their own lives, lost it culturally through forces of immigration, lost it economically through forces of globalization. And my point is that the political leaders have got to respond to those anxieties and not end up in a situation where a kind of
So cut short, but Ben, there's three things there that I wanted to just put to you, and I wanted you to, give your opinion in a nutshell. But, we talked about he wants to reverse the Brexit process, number one. Number two, that he talks about the real reasons for Brexit, that people were losing their identity culturally with immigration coming in and the unfairness that's happening there, and none of us can deny exactly what's happening. And I am friendly with lots of people in England. I've been there many times, and I feel for what is happening right now in terms of the amount of people that is flooding the country, with the repercussions that it's going to overburden the services, the hospitals, the schools, the housing, and the fabric of society. And it's making things, it's putting the United Kingdom into a very, very dangerous position. So there's Tony Blair. We didn't ever expect to get that admission from him. So he's admitting the reasons why the people would have wanted to vote themselves out of what I like to call the EU dictatorial Ponzi scheme. Have you any thoughts on what you just heard there, Ben?
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary to hear him talk about people being legitimately concerned about unbridled immigration globalization of the economy, losing control of their lives. He's the man who started all of that. He's the one who threw the floodgates open to immigration. He's the one who signed us into, when the Lisbon Treaty, they wanted a constitution and it was rejected. He's the one who signed us up into the Lisbon Treaty. It's the EU that has stripped us of the ability to determine our own futures. The EU, an unelected bunch of bureaucrats sitting in Brussels, making laws behind closed doors without any democratic process, and then forcing countries like ourselves, treating our parliament like it's some kind of district council, and shoving laws down our throats. And Tony Blair is the ultimate globalist. That's what Tony Blair is. So the way I see it, there are two things I think going on, John. The first is that these globe-trotting senior politicians don't draw their personal validation from the people that elect them. They validate themselves by the company they keep on the global stage. So Boris Johnson, who, by the way, is not a Brexiteer either in my book, he's another globalist, got great succor from G7 meetings, from being in Davos, meeting all these other people he regarded as his intellectual equal. And he wanted to sidle up to them. And there's a natural desire amongst them to do that. That's one thing. Then the other force at play here is that they have a contempt for democracy, because they think that state intervention works, that the state thinks better than the average individual, the state will spend the money better. So they're large state interventionist politicians. The Conservative Party is no longer conservative. It doesn't believe in a small state and low taxes. It believes, and Rishi Sunak is perhaps the best example of it, that they know it all and the people need to fall into place and they will do our thinking for us. I go to GB News studios quite a lot, as you may or may not be aware. And when I exit Paddington Station, there's a small staircase that I have to go up. It's a very narrow tread, by the way. It's like 6 inches. Every step on that tread has something like, don't take more than one step at a time, take the lift, don't read your phone, as you walk up the steps. We've reached a stage where the state is telling us how to navigate a staircase. What the hell has gone wrong with personal responsibility? And this is fundamentally undemocratic. When the state is thinking for you down to how you navigate a staircase, it has stripped you of all personal agency. It's stripped you of the inability to think and act on your own. And what is that if that is not the fundamental undermining of democracy? Tony Blair speaks with forked tongue. He is not someone who genuinely cares what the people think. He would wish to make the people feel comfortable, but he would then go on prosecuting his big state, nanny state, which Boris Johnson and I always say to a wet nurse level. That's what they want. They want a highly regulated, highly taxed society. They get the money in the Exchequer's coffers, and then they can decide what they do with the money because they know best. And before I finish, I'm just going to say Rishi Sunak is the worst. He was at Winchester College. He's privileged. He's rich. Oxford University, Stanford, Goldman Sachs. If you watch the leadership contest, it was, I know this. I know how to address detail. I know how to get across the detail. I know what's good for the nation. I know how to solve the problems. He couldn't give a damn about democracy. He thinks he knows it. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant, but that is the fundamental problem here.
Of socialism is that you surrender quite a bit of power over your own life.
I must stop and give you a bit of context. I was never intending on playing this, but this is exactly what you were speaking about, and I want you to listen to it in this 1-minute clip.
To the state, well, we all do that to some extent, but of course it went much further. You pay very high taxes, and they wish to take even higher taxes because they think that politicians can spend money better than the people can spend it. The more you take away, the less there is for private industry, and that's where the creation of wealth comes. So you have to establish very clear limits on the role of government. And really, you know, politicians, I think, should sometimes just be a little bit more modest about their abilities than they are. We can't run everything, and we shouldn't try. I believe that we were going towards a way of life in which people were constantly looking to the state to solve their problems and to do things for them. You know, when the state does everything for you, it'll soon take everything from you. You will then have no basis for personal freedom, political freedom, nor economic freedom.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know how you conjured that clip up. It's like that. And I've never seen that clip before, by the way, John. But I mean, she said it absolutely brilliantly, much more succinctly than I could. She's spot on, absolutely spot on.
Yeah. Whenever I heard you talking there, I thought, I've heard somebody saying this before. And there you go. No, we keep huge amounts of clips. We're getting good at what we do. We're getting better. We do this every week now, and we spend a lot of time putting things together. So what I want to do now, Ben, there's two more things that I want to do, and we're focusing on exactly the same area. And I just want a few sound bites out of you. We're finishing in 15 minutes, just to let you know, so that you can let your family know or whatever. And I hope that
Yes,
people
sorry.
are enjoying the live chat here. You know, thanks very much for coming along. Still give people a like, a love, and a share. Give us a like, a love, and a share. If you're new to the platform, please make it known by even leaving a message in the live chat. And as I say, I do have one question, and I'm keeping that to the very end for Ben. But if there's any more questions there, feel free to pop them up into the live chat, and we'll put as many as we can to Ben before that we close the stream. So what I want to do now, Ben, is that I want to now go in, and if this works right, I really want to try to change what is behind me here. So if you just bear with me for a second, and we're going to move on to something else. Now here we go. Where this is the one I'm looking for. Yes, there it is. There. Here we go. Let's hope that this comes up. Right, here we go. Sometimes you can still hear me, Ben. Yeah.
I can, yeah. I'm reading it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to speak on here, so sometimes it takes a wee bit of time to change a screen here, but I'm speaking now. What we're going to do is we want to move on to, I guess, looking and examining looking at and examining the reasons why that Northern Ireland finds themselves in the place that they find themselves in. Now, okay, we've talked about the Belfast Agreement. We do understand that there are a particular conglomerate in the equation. I'm just trying to put that up by other means there. But there's a particular conglomerate in the equation, and I'm saying conglomerate, and that be the SDLP, the Sinn Féiners, the Alliance Party, the Dublin government, the American establishment, that be Irish America, and they're all pushing the British government into, I'm going to say, separating Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. Now, they're doing that for their own vested interest, and their vested interest is this, is that in Irish America, they look at Northern Ireland and they think that Northern Ireland should be part of this one Ireland approach, you know, this romantic dream of this so-called United Ireland, and they'll do anything to try to achieve that. Now, I wanted to play a little clip here from Micheál Martin. And I want to take us down this line for a reason, and I want to get a wee bit of commentary from what it is that you hear. Now, this is firstly Micheál Martin literally speaking against the foundation, the cornerstone of his own Irish state. And let me explain what I mean. The proclamation that was came around in sort of the 100 years ago in Ireland, somewhere between 1916 and the foundation in 1921. I think the proclamation came in 1916, and it was by their so-called patriots that would have stood up for Ireland. Now, in that proclamation, it states these words, and it states these words quite specifically. And the the words of this proclamation, I've done a wee bit of history, and they were inspired from way, way back in Ireland, from a man called James Fintan Lowther, who would have always talked about Ireland belonging to the people, from the soil to the sky. You know, Ireland belongs to the people. You go to Ireland right now and you go to all their monuments, and and all you will see and all you ever hear is that Ireland belongs to the people. The land belongs to the people. Now, in their proclamation, the words that was inspired by this man, James Fintan Lowther, was that that there was a thing. Do you know the term indefeasible, Ben? I know you're a man, a wordsmith. Do you know indefeasible?
No, what can't be split?
Okay. You're absolutely, you're 100%. So the word indefeasible means that it cannot be subject to change. You were 100% right when you said that it cannot be split. So the proclamation in Ireland talks about the indefeasible right of the Irish people to be sovereign and have ownership of the land. In other words, that what's in that proclamation cannot be changed. Now, I want to play a clip from Micheál Martin just to show you that what you explained, say, for example, about Boris Johnson and about Rishi Sunak, well, here is their counterpart in the Irish state right now, who just happens to be running the government. And when we understand why that it is that they would like fairness and impartiality would literally wouldn't be present with them whenever they're dealing with Northern Ireland. And why? Because that they're desperately trying to break up the United Kingdom to have Northern Ireland into the European Union, and by extension have then caused problems with Scotland, and hook, line and sinker, perhaps the entire United Kingdom would end up back in again. So here we are playing his words, and I want you to listen to these words very carefully and then give me a wee bit of commentary. Sorry about the screen, the way that it has turned out, but I tried to do something that hasn't worked before, and I didn't realize, well, it wouldn't work this time. But anyway, you'll hear Micheál Martin as we go.
There was no strategy for implementing Brexit. There was just a strategy for winning the vote through a combination of bluster and aggression. It was not a positive assertion of sovereignty. It was the culmination of 30 years of an increasingly corrosive scapegoating of Europe and immigrants for the homegrown divisions in British society. Fundamentally, the narrow Brexit majority represented a rejection of strong rule-based cooperation between states. It asserted a narrow vision of sovereignty, which developed in the 19th century and directly led to the two bloodiest wars in history. Let there be no doubt about where Ireland stands. We want nothing to do with a backward-looking idea of sovereignty.
Oh my God. I can't believe he said that. Wow. I mean, there you go. The man doesn't actually believe in his own country.
There you go. And he goes on to say that they want to be fully aligned with the EU. They want to be a vassal of the EU, is effectively what he's saying. But do you see when that man stands on Easter Sunday? I've been there basically a few times, just sitting in the background watching what they're doing. But what they do, he stands beside Irish army people who reads out this proclamation, stating that fact that talks about the indefeasible right of the Irish people to be sovereign and have ownership of the land. Now, in that's the cornerstone of the Irish state, the Free State, the Republic of Ireland. And there is Micheál Martin, the head of the so-called Republican Party down there, and he's saying that he wants nothing to do with the backward idea of sovereignty. Have you ever had such an admission, Western worldwide?
Well, von der Leyen used to talk about pooled sovereignty, but what is pooled sovereignty? You can't pool something that is distinct. It can't be pooled with something else. And sovereignty is a distinct entity. A sovereign nation is a distinct entity. It can't be homogenized with a whole load of other nations. That is the end of your sovereignty. Yeah. The man, frankly, I don't know how, I imagine all your viewers are over 18. Micheál Martin is a bloody fool, isn't he? He's a bloody fool. He had Michel Barnier sitting opposite him in that clip, and he was blowing smoke up Barnier's backside, playing to the European Union agenda. But the EU is not just undemocratic. The EU is anti-democratic. It abhors democracy. It abhors sovereignty. It wants to assemble power in itself. It wants to strip member states of power and empower itself. That's how it gets its way. That's how it promulgates its agenda. And if Michael Martin can't see, they're going to come after Ireland. It's been a great economic ride for Ireland. They've had a lot of British money going into Ireland via Brussels, which I said at Dromore. I don't know if you remember. You know, the British government's actually invested more in the Republic of Ireland than it has in Northern Ireland by virtue of its contributions to Brussels, which then go back to Ireland. So Ireland's had a fantastic run with the EU, but that is ending. The EU is cash strapped. These high interest rates that we're now experiencing across Europe is going to cause real stress amongst EU member states, and the EU is going to be under real pressure. And I would like to speak to Michael Martin in 5 years' time, when the economic reality of high inflation, a currency that doesn't actually belong to Ireland, because the euro ain't their currency, at least sterling is our currency. The Bank of England can never go bust. Ireland can go bust.
Yeah.
I want to see where he is in 5 years' time. I've never heard such idiocy from a head of state. Unbelievable. Unbelievable for him to say that. And he was just cozying up to Michel Barnier. I mean, unbelievable. If I were the Irish people, I'd boot him straight out of office on the basis of that speech.
Yeah, well, what comes after is probably even worse and even worse again. What I mean is Leo Varadkar takes over in December. That's worse. And Sinn Féin after that. So there you go. There's Ireland is on the road to an economical basket case. And there's one other thing, Ben, that I mean, I done a lot of dealing in the South over the years. I understand that Ireland, they give sweetheart deals to the American companies in the pharmaceutical and in the technology, the computer industry. And, you know, though they were basically paying no tax, but what Europe is trying to do right now, what globalization is doing right now, and this is part of what happened to Liz Truss, is that whenever she mentioned reducing corporation tax, we see they're looking to harmonize. They're looking to harmonize the corporation tax across the Western world. There's no competition, in other words, is what they're looking for. And that's why Liz Truss fell. And that's why the likes of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of England, who are globalists, let's not make any mistake about that. They are globalists, and they were looking to take anybody down who wants to put back in place the sovereignty of a country.
And they fear an independent, nimble, deregulated, low-tax United Kingdom. And that's why we need to be there. The fact that they fear us going in that direction means we need to go in that direction. Our politicians need to understand that. They fear it because they know it's empowering for us. We would rocket propel ourselves. And this move to 25% corporation tax rate by Rishi Sunak is a disaster for Northern Ireland, particularly a disaster. It's a disaster for the United Kingdom. It's a particular disaster for Northern Ireland. As it is, you've had to compete with the 12% tax rate south of the border. And that has sucked the lifeblood out of Northern Ireland. That and the massive infrastructure spend that republics had, you know, from Brussels. That has been a real, and the British government's been asleep at the wheel. And by effectively putting Northern Ireland now on more than twice the corporation tax rate of the Republic, they are tying your economic hands behind your back. And so when they talk about Northern Ireland being a deficit economy, it is through their own policies that they've created that deficit. The first thing I would do if I were in charge, I'm not in charge, but the first thing I would do is, if I was in charge, was cut corporation tax rate down to 10% and take the fight to the Republic. How can you would see business flood into Northern Ireland, and the bean counters wouldn't be able to forecast it because they've got no imagination. But I can tell you as a businessman, if someone told me by moving to Northern Ireland, I can cut my corporation tax rate from 25% to 10%, I would relocate my business to Northern Ireland, to Belfast instantly. I wouldn't even hesitate. It would be instant. And why do you think Amazon, Apple, Google, why all these people in Dublin? It's because of it's not with the love of the Irish. They're there for the low corporation tax rate. And Rishi Sunak doesn't, well, if he gets it, it doesn't suit his agenda. It doesn't suit their agenda. But what they've done with going to 25% is a disaster. It's a disaster for Northern Ireland. And we need to really make that case. People in Westminster need to have it driven home to them that they are sinking Northern Ireland by increasing corporation tax. It's a disaster.
100%, Ben. It's like joining the other team to score goals against yourself,
Yeah.
and that's what drove this thing called the Celtic Tiger, was the low corporation tax, which
Low
brought in the
corporation
investment,
tax,
which
yeah.
created the jobs, which created the money in the
Absolutely.
economy. And well, anyway, look, I mean, what are we whenever we're not economists? Well, according to Rishi Sunak. Back to the meme and behind us, and I want to go to one more wee little clip here. And again, it's just one of these good memes that you're going to get a little bit out of for yourself. I think that you've got out of the last couple of memes. Micheál Martin wants nothing to do with the backward idea of sovereignty, and Margaret Thatcher had a crystal ball for 2022 whenever she explained the circum. I see whenever I seen that clip, and I thought about what happened to Liz Truss, because Margaret Thatcher was actually promoting
Liz
what it was that
Truss's
Liz Truss
agenda.
tried to do. There you go. There you go.
And Liz Truss was absolutely spot on. And it's a tragedy that she wasn't able to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. So looking at what's behind me here on this side, Irish Department for Foreign Affairs funded New Ireland. There's two, there's a crossroads there, and you can take whatever one you want. You can take the money coming from the Irish Department for Foreign Affairs, a fork in the road, or you can fight for your survival. This side, that side, I don't know what side. You can fight for your survival in a meaningful, proactive way, and we can restore the UK. And like the promotion on top of the Belfast Agreement, I'm going to say it's your decision. And that decision is, that's aimed at the people in Northern Ireland. So we either take the money from the Irish Department for Foreign Affairs funded New Ireland, or we fight for our survival in a meaningful, proactive way. Ben, I say this symbolically because that we've been doing a couple of streams in the last few weeks exposing who that it is that the Irish Department for Foreign Affairs are funding, how that it is that these people are what has become NGOs, how that it is that he who pays the piper gets the call, the tune, right? And we've showed this conclusively in the last few weeks, and we're really pushing this so that we're appealing to people that well, I know that the pathway I'm choosing, and that is for me to fight for my survival in a meaningful, proactive way. And I'm going to want to restore the UK. And when I say that, I mean using weapons of words, yeah? The only bullets that we'll be using is bullet points, highlighting the problems that actually exist. Now, that isn't mine. The weapons of words is mine, but that came to me whenever I was giving the presentation in a place in Northern Ireland quite lately, where somebody shouted that up from after that he heard me saying that. But what I want to do, Ben, with this meme in the background, is that I want to now, literally, this is the last thing that we're going to do. It's only a minute long. We're closing very, very shortly. I have one question to put to you. And I want for you to listen to, there's this thing right now. It's called American-driven liberal homogeny, whatever they want to call it. And basically what it means is making the world in America's image. And America have sufficient reach right across the Western world right now. With the various groupings that they're associated with. That years ago they would have said that whatever happens in America, we're 10 years behind. Well, with the internet right now, we're probably a week behind, is the way that things works. And whenever you see some of these bonkers things that these people are promoting, in denial of objective truth, let's just say, whenever you see some of these things which is destroying the fabric of society, well, I'm going to show you that these people have been working in Northern Ireland from a way, way, way back around the times of and before the Belfast Agreement, with their Atlantic philanthropies, which was a CIA slush fund, and we done a stream about that, and we proved and showed conclusively that that was actually the case. But I want to show you a man called Richie Neal, who was treading the boards in Northern Ireland just a lot of months ago. He's a friend of Nancy Pelosi and a friend of Joe Biden. Now listen very, very carefully to what Richie Neal had to say with reference what the Americans are supporting in the Belfast Agreement. The only thing that they're supporting the Democrat Party in America are supporting are the things that want to destroy Northern Ireland. Now, I play a little clip with Richie Neal at the start. I play a little clip with Richie Neal at the end with two sound bites. And in the middle, you'll hear that how that Micheál Martin, that's the man that wants nothing to do with the backward idea of sovereignty, how that he is boasting about how that they are, at this present, putting in place the infrastructure which is uniting Ireland in terms of infrastructure, let's just say. And then I want to ask you a few questions on it, or I want you to just give your opinion on it whenever this is finished. And thanks very much, Ben, for staying for this amount of time. But I have to say, I found the stream very, very interesting. I see that the numbers have really, really stayed high. And I'm doing this for a reason. I laid this out in such a way that what we can do is that we can cut this into small clips and we can make little subsections on these specific areas. So I think we got 3 for the price of 1 out of you tonight. So here we go. Not that I pay you, by the way. Ben pays to be on here. I forgot to say. Here we go, Ben.
Question: when Ireland gave up claim to the north and the British gave up a claim to the north, was the correct compromise. And the next step that we take ought to be a referendum question. But we've got to prepare people on both sides for that question.
So what you'll have heard there, Ben, is that, you know, that Ireland gave up claim to the north, Articles 2 and 3, and we're going to do a stream on that maybe next week and show how that Ireland has never ever given up their claim to the north, so to speak. So they're in I'm going to say they're in dereliction of their duty, or they're in contravention of their obligation under the Belfast Agreement, because that was their obligation to give up claim to Northern Ireland.
Yeah,
but
it was
you and I both say
their constitution. Yeah.
Well, I let's just say there may be another court case that will go to the Supreme Court very soon. Let's just say that. So here we go. So there was Richie Neal from America explaining that the next step is for a border poll, and you hear how they're all pushing for this border poll. Now, we'll play now Micheál Martin, and he can talk about his shared island approach. So here we go.
A challenge which must be accepted by any person who truly wishes to build a common future for all on our island. Down to today, this remains the single most important challenge to all who genuinely want to build reconciliation and a shared future on our island. Ours is a proudly Republican party, founded by a brilliant generation of men and women who had sacrificed much to secure independence for our country. We have to get on with the hard work of moving from talk to action, and that's exactly what we are doing. The Shared Island Initiative, which I established, is the first time in our history where there's a sustained investment to support vital North-South projects to build deeper connections and understanding. Projects that have been talked about for decades are now underway. The Narrow Water Bridge will finally be delivered. We have provided the funding, engaged with local communities, and will move forward with what is both a very practical connection across the border, but also a powerful symbol of our future. So too is our investment in the Ulster Canal, a project which reopens and makes accessible a resource to support social and economic development. We have put in place funding for a wide range of other vital cross-border infrastructure, making sure that profound challenges like meeting the climate, biodiversity and energy security crises are tackled together. An all-island network to support the transition to electric vehicles is being developed. An all-island strategy for developing rail services will very shortly be completed. And we're also investing in an all-island approach to achieving breakthroughs in cancer treatment and a range of other key research challenges. Through our investments, we are determined to show a new and prosperous way forward for all communities. The most inclusive dialogue ever between communities is also taking place. Over 2,000 people have contributed to the dialogues so far, with a real diversity of contributions. It's not about looking for easy answers. It's about trying to have a real engagement which promotes concrete action. There's been no shortage of people willing to make grand claims about services, but it is remarkable how little has been done to actually quantify what the current situation is on both sides of the border. And that's why we are already publishing the most detailed ever research commissioned on health services, trade, childcare, education and other vital areas between North and South under the Shared Island Initiative. This is giving us a blueprint for the future, a blueprint for action which benefits all on our island. That's real action. And central to our identity as a party is that we believe in the Republican vision of a country which truly unites all the people on our island, which respects diversity, different identities, and puts behind it the divisions of the past.
And trying to figure out the relationship in what is known as Strand 2 of the Good Friday Agreement. Strand 2 of the Good Friday Agreement was everything to us who supported the nationalist position. Because Strand 2 said, Belfast, Dublin.
Strand 2 was everything to us, the Americans,
Well,
that supported
yeah.
the Belfast Agreement, which said Belfast, Dublin. And the Shared Island Initiative, I have on audio, Richie Neal also talking about the very fact that the Shared Island Initiative is the way forward. And just look at what they're doing as we speak, Ben, that they're amalgamating the island of Ireland, so to speak, before our very eyes. I'm going to say that, you know, there's a lot of things in what Micheál Martin was saying there that none of us could argue against. You know, the cooperation in terms of the medical, the health, you know, even the Ulster Canal. I mean, I've done a bit of boating in the past and I love that type of thing, you know, sailing canals and so on. And I would always have loved to have seen that opening up, even when you think about, you know, the rail, whatever. But you see, when those people in here, the Irish Department for Foreign Affairs, are funding this new Ireland, but they're not only funding that, they're funding people from within our community to literally to cause divisions. We exposed a document from the Irish Department for Foreign Affairs just last week, one of their subsidiaries, G2, who's basically their MI5. And in this document that was given to us, it states that they were trying to cause divisions between the DUP and the UUP. They were trying to, I'm just trying to remember the areas and where it was. They were trying to divide constitutional and non-constitutional unionism. And we have this in our possession right now. Now that is what I say that we need to be very, very careful about in Northern Ireland. In other words, they're not keeping up with their obligations under the Belfast Agreement to having removed Articles 2 and 3 of the Republic's Constitution, which removed their illegal claim to Northern Ireland. Yeah. And what I just showed you just proves it.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we said earlier on, isn't it, John? We see the Belfast Agreement as a settlement agreement, a peace settlement, and they see it as a bridgehead, as a step towards further integration. And that's what you saw with Richie Neal, and you saw with Micheál Martin, and all that talk about economic cooperation, you know, infrastructure being built across from it's all designed to capture Northern Ireland. It's all designed to set in place the economic institutional capture of Northern Ireland. That's what it's about.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. So Ben, thanks very much for coming along. Thanks very much for staying with us for such a long time. You know, I want to say to the live chat there, you know, thank you again to the live chat for staying and keeping the numbers high for again such a long time. I'm just going back, Ben. I just want you to just touch on this one wee thing, and it's not a biggie. It's from a man. I'm just looking back. There's not many questions here. It's not questions. There's a lot of commentary, but there's no real depth of question in them. So here we go. So I'm going to pop this up, Ben, and I just want you to read through it here. In fact, I'll read it for you, or you read it yourself, and see if you can.
You might need to. My glasses are all wrong at the moment.
Let me do this. So Ben, assuming the end of the protocol and the resumption of Stormont, will we really be any more secure within the Union, given that the Belfast Agreement is evidently a pathway to the Irish unification? So he's saying that assuming the end of the protocol and the resumption of Stormont, will we really be any more secure within the Union? No, well, I'll let you answer that, Ben. I can answer that very, very easy. So good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you can get rid of the protocol, it does evidence to some extent that the Belfast Agreement, at least insofar as that particular step was concerned, eventually did work. But I think I would turn the question almost on its head and say, what do we need to do to restore, practically restore Northern Ireland to the Union? Just leave aside the constitutional aspects for a second. And I would be doing what Michael Martin is trying to do on the island of Ireland, and which our politicians so singularly fail to do, which is the surest way to make the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland strong and secure is to make Northern Ireland prosperous, independently prosperous. And it is a complete failure in 40 or 50 years of British government policy that we've ended up with Northern Ireland at an £8,000 per head deficit economy. It's completely, fundamentally wrong. And 1.8 million people should be able, it's a big enough population with a big enough parent, if you like, in terms of the United Kingdom, to make it a tiger economy on its own. And that's what the British government should be aiming for. It should be aiming for a tiger economy in Northern Ireland, to be, if we can't ourselves be Singapore, as entirely as the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland can be our Singapore. It can be I'd make the whole thing tax-free. Make it our bridgehead to international trade on a very competitive, deregulated basis. And then the Republic would have no claim that would be effective in Northern Ireland, because through your relationship with Great Britain, you would be prosperous. And that's the end of it. That's why Michael Martin is going for the economic drive, because he knows if he can economically capture Northern Ireland, he then gets the political and constitutional capture. And that's what the protocol is all about too. It's about diversion of trade away from Great Britain and towards Northern Ireland.
Ben, thanks very much for that. And, I would say that most unionists who would understand things would actually be right up that street in terms of that. I mean, that would be the perfect settlement, wouldn't it? That if the Dublin government could say that, well, okay, we respect the rights of the Irish people to be, well, aligning with us, and the British government could say, well, we expect the rights of the British people in Northern Ireland to be aligning with us. EU put out, this is how it's happening, and that would be the perfect solution for Northern Ireland. That would be the perfect one.
Richie Neal said something that was fundamentally wrong, by the way. He said the United Kingdom gave up its claim to Northern Ireland. No. The Belfast Agreement substantiates and confirms that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. I don't know what Richie Neal has been smoking, but he got it completely wrong.
Yeah, I think he draws back to it was a claim that actually, and I'll tell you what happened there. It was I can't remember the American president back in the time. I'll remember the name in a minute, but he convinced
Clinton.
Margaret Thatcher to sign the Anglo-Irish Agreement back in the day.
Reagan.
Reagan was the man, yeah. And then they encouraged the John Major government in 1990 through a man called Peter Brooke to utter these words, but that was to bring the IRA in from the cold. And this was what the Americans are taking. These words were that Britain has no selfish strategic or economic interest in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
That's where he takes his claim from.
I remember we discussed that last time on the last program. How can 100%. You have a strategic or selfish interest in part of your own entity? It is part 100%. Of you,
And before we close, on a funny note, I interviewed a man at Larne from England, from Westminster-super-Mare, and he was trying to understand the Northern Ireland problem. And this was a genuine question that I was explaining to him, pointing out into the sea at Larne, that we have a border between, England, Scotland, and Wales, and this port here in Larne. And he says, "Hang on a minute, isn't that like, someone putting like a checkpoint in your hallway between your living room and your kitchen?" It's both the same house, and somebody else comes in and says that we're going to put a checkpoint there.
It's unacceptable.
Yeah, definitely. Ben, thanks very much for coming along. Thanks to the
Thank
live
you.
chat
Thank
for
you,
staying,
John.
you know, and really thank you for staying this
Thank you,
long. And
everyone.
please accept my apologies. I know that I've kept you well over your time. Ben, I will see you at the Supreme Court on the 30th of November, the 1st of December. No doubt we'll have a little glass of beer or whatever. And let's hope that we're going to celebrate after what happens in the Supreme Court. So
For
it's
sure.
good night from me. It's good night from Ben. And good night to the live chat. So
Good
playing us
night,
out
everyone.
with something that's going to put a smile on everyone's face. See you all next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Program here tonight with Blood and Thunder. I want to see every flag, every hand, and every foot. I want to see them Roman Catholics hearing our music tonight. And I want to hear, and if I take a notion, maybe the women will go up and down these aisles. The last time I was in here, we had a crowd of Shankill Road women and Belfast women up and down these aisles. Once we start here tonight, friends, we may stop to 12 o'clock. So I hope you are in no hurry, because we're in no hurry. Everybody come up here tonight and introduce themselves. Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm Wooly John Heaney from Kilkeel. I'm a Protestant, and I'm proud to be one. If I drop this mace here tonight, I would like to say to Jim or maybe to Nigel, pick her up and throw her back up to me, because we're going to let her rip here tonight, one way or another.